You're listening to SBS News.
In the western region of Azerbaijan lies the mountainous enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, known by its Armenian population as Artsakh. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Armenia and Azerbaijan have fought 2 wars and suffered thousands of casualties as each side stakes a historical claim to the land. Since December of 2022, Azerbaijani forces have formed a blockade along a road known as the Lachin Corridor. It's the only road linking the 120,000 ethnic Armenians in the region to Armenia and the outside world. They call the corridor the Road of Life. On the 1st of September, the Armenian-Australian community gathered in Sydney, calling on the Australian government to take action against what many fear could end in a genocide.
No blockade! End the blockade! Unblock Artsakh!
A few hundred from the community of over 50,000 Armenians living in Australia gathered at Town Hall Square in Sydney. For many here, this protest is far from their first. John Jack Kolokossian of the Armenian Youth Federation of Australia says he has been marching for the recognition of Armenian history since he was 5 years old.
1915, never again. They were the words I used to scream at the age of 5, passed down from generation to generation. Me, a 5-year-old child, bearing the wound of intergenerational trauma, marched through our CBD, participated in protests, screaming 1915, never again, all with the hope that my ancestors' history will never be repeated.
The protest organiser and the executive director of the Armenian National Committee of Australia, Kolokossian, says the people living in Artsakh have been cut off from essential supplies.
People are malnourished, and there's been reports of 1 in every 3 deaths being as a result of starvation and malnutrition. The people don't have basic supplies that would allow them to live a happy and fruitful life because of this genocidal blockade that Azerbaijan has placed on the people of Artsakh since the 12th of December 2022.
Clutching homemade signs beneath their arms, the Armenian flag draped across their backs, hundreds, many of them children, piled out of buses into Sydney's Town Hall Square.
Our community is active. They've never given up, and they won't give up. They won't give up because they understand the trauma that their parents and grandparents faced in not being able to speak about these issues. And today, the youth of our community are the ones on the forefront leading this cause.
Whilst the Australian government has not made a public statement regarding the blockade, international organisations and human rights groups have called for the immediate opening of the Lachin Corridor. In April, following orders from the International Court of Justice to reopen the corridor, Azerbaijan instead installed a military checkpoint, a move their president, Ilham Aliyev, says was in response to Armenia and the Red Cross allegedly misusing the corridor. Access through the corridor is now completely shut off, cutting off humanitarian aid, including food, fuel and medical supplies, from reaching the 120,000 Armenians living there. Mr. Kolokossian says many of them are particularly vulnerable.
Amnesty International is reporting that these people are living in peril. There's Armenian children waiting in line for bread for hours in the early hours of the morning. There's women who don't have access to baby formula. So we want Australia to participate in an airlift into Artsakh to provide these 30,000 children, the 20,000 elderly and the 9,000 living with disabilities, the most basic supplies that they're entitled to.
According to Azerbaijan, humanitarian access is available through the alternative route of Akhdam, a road referred to by local Armenians as the Road of Death. A spokesperson from Artsakh describes the proposed alternative as a ploy intended to deflect international attention from the crisis. These concerns were echoed by the International Committee of the Red Cross, who in July released a statement noting that attempts at delivering aid to the region have been blocked at all entrances, including Akhdam. But at an emergency UN meeting called upon by Armenia's government, Azerbaijan's United Nations representative Yashar Aliyev says Azerbaijan categorically rejects the claims that a crisis is occurring.
Armenia's actions are nothing but the embodiment of designed political hypocrisy, and its appeal to the Security Council is a part of the campaign that it has been pursuing over the months to manipulate and mislead the international community.
In August, prominent former prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Luis Moreno Ocampo, released a 28-page document calling for the blockade to be considered a genocide against the Armenians, adding that President Aliyev cannot use these tactics to force a negotiation.
And they are not receiving food for the last months, so they will die in a few weeks. So we need to open the corridor, not because a negotiation, because it's a genocide. And US, European Union cannot be confused about to President Aliyev. President Aliyev has to understand he cannot be authorized to commit a genocide to force a negotiation.
Over the last few weeks, Armenian officials and residents of Nagorno-Karabakh have reported kidnappings at the checkpoint. And as military tensions build, both Armenian and Azerbaijani forces have accused each other of provocation. An agreement between the two countries is yet to be reached, and the future of the region, as well as the people living there, remains unclear. Sydney Lang for SBS News.